Well, I knew it was going to be quite big, but this is huge. It's red, it's French, and it's owned by a man who looks like he's going fishing. Surprisingly enough, this is going to be a bit of a treat for me because I have never ever driven a Renault Laguna, which might sound strange because I've driven just about everything else with the exception of the Renault Laguna. I did drive the 21 and the 25 and I really did have a soft spot for those cars. I am going to start with the things about this car that I do like, because there are many things, and one of the main things is actually the styling of it. The original Laguna was definitely a 90s car, 1990s throughout. 1994 it came out, which meant it was probably in development whilst we were still in the 80s ever so slightly. Yet somehow it doesn't really even look 90s, it looks ever so slightly 2000s to me, but 90s as well. It's almost like Renault had some idea of what cars would look like in the future when they made this, and cars ended up looking a bit like this in the future. They don't now though. This is a working car, as you can see. It's not all polished up. The black bits are not really black, they're kind of grey look. It's got lacquer peel. It's got, looks like a scab on the side that's been picked. He did tell me what this was for, and I can't remember. Another bit of lacquer peel there, lacquer peel on the roof, lacquer peel there, lacquer peel. This car lacks appeal. Oh, that's not very fair, is it? It has got faded headlamps as well, of course, but they are plastic. If you want to blame anyone for fading plastic headlamps, it probably is Renault, because in 1994 they were making these whilst everybody else was still using glass. Glass is better. Underneath the patina though, we don't find any rust anywhere, which is fabulous. They really did rust-proof these cars very well. If you're younger than 30 years old, you may not remember a time when car manufacturers used to build cars to last. But they did, honestly. It's not even a joke, they did. They didn't want them falling apart after 10 years. French do style, and this is a stylish car. The big clamshell bonnet always looks good. The doors without any stupid grooves everywhere, and the back end that just looks, well, like someone's designed it rather than try to make it out of cardboard and then try to, what am I talking about? There are limits with this, you know. If I set off talking and I don't know what's at the end of the sentence, sometimes it just won't work. And that was a good example of that. Oh, another thing I do like about the Renault is it is spacious. And again, it is the outside suits the inside. It looks like it was very much designed by people that got along with each other. You know, and that's interesting because not everybody does, do they? I reckon it's worthwhile testing out the rear legroom. Well, I knew it was going to be quite big, but this is huge. Absolutely huge in the back of here. Unless George has moved the front seat forward so that...
Tiny leg. Short leg.
You probably moved the front seat forward. But actually, still loads of... Oh, hang on, one minute. If I swing my head back like that, I can touch the roof lining ever so slightly, but most of the time you don't tend to do that. I don't, anyway.
Most people aren't your size.
There they are. I'm not that big, you know.
You are.
You are. If this was the position at which you had to stick with, I might struggle with this a little bit. Although, come to think of it, it does ever so slightly put me in mind of my Rover 25, where you sit looking way over the bonnet so you've got really good visibility. Now, what I should do, I suppose, is... No, I wasn't expecting that. Yeah, that's about right. And as a driver, this is the most important place to sit. It's very difficult to drive a car from the back. The funky 90s interior. Oh, and look, actually, couldn't think of it. Oh dear, was Renault one of the first car manufacturers to stop putting proper carpet in things? Besides that, it all looks quite nicely put together, come to think of it. Decent plastics, fading a bit with the sun, but We can accept that at this age. Stereo cover, somewhere to keep your fags. Is that it is? It's an original stereo as well, and it gets covered up. Now, I'm not sure whether that's to make the interior look less cluttered or to hide the fact that you've got a stereo to would-be criminals. It's a strange phrase, that, isn't it? Would-be criminals, because they always are criminals. They're not just they're not aspiring to be criminals. They actually are criminals, and that's why they do criminal activities. The steering wheel, of course, is leather, and it's not even worn out. And we have stalks, as you'd expect, but then we have this, the stereo control stalk, which controls volume and stations and whether you drop into a canal or not, by the looks of it. That's a rather modern feature, but it was only modern at the time. Now it's not modern, but it feels modern considering the age of the car. And although that's a newish one, yeah, a newish one, because the Renault Laguna then was replaced a couple of years later by the Laguna 2, which was also rather futuristic, but quite angular as well. Maybe that's where the 90s conflicted with itself, because there was quite a lot of smooth lines going on in the 90s, and then there was an awful lot of rather angular lines as well. But this one is smooth. This one's as smooth as Barry White. Boot, there's a button that you press. Look at that. Oh gosh, that's a heavy tailgate. Very rarely do you find yourself needing to hold your mobile phone so you can film yourself opening a tailgate. So that's probably not fair for me to actually damn it on such a thing. But it is very heavy. And because I feel like I was being a bit unfair there by saying it was heavy, I'm going to try it again, this time without using that. Just using my hands and my thumb. Ready? Oh. That was a bit of an exaggerated sound, that. It's not hard, not for me, but I'm a super big man, as you've heard. Maybe for a small lady, for an old lady, or someone who's just a bit puny, this might actually be hard work. Tell me what you think. Is it hard work for you? Has your life been ruined by a Renault Laguna tailgate? The boot, of course, is commodious. Look at that. That is what you call a big boot. If I was doing the old thing about climbing in there to see whether a man can fit in, I can clearly see a man can fit in. I could fit in that boot if I wanted to climb in there. If I wanted to be in that boot right now, I could get in, but I don't. I don't actually want to be in the boot. It's pointless. Because this car is French and from the 90s, it will have a diesel engine underneath there. Renault did do petrol engines as well, and blimey, I tell you what, I've had a few and they've been great. And they've not been the most reliable, but they've been very economical and very powerful. So I would imagine that if you're going to get rid of that really good petrol engine and stick a diesel engine in there, it's going to be an exceedingly good diesel engine. So the next thing to do would be to open up the bonnet and have a good gander at this particular engine. But I can't be bothered, so I'm not going to. Starts nicely. One car I did have an awful lot of experience with was the Renault 25, which is probably the closest comparison I could make to this thing, because it's big, soft and comfortable and actually quite easy going. One thing I certainly can't do with this car today is really give it a thrashing, because the clutch is slipping ever so slightly. I'd love to be able to tell you that's a feature of the Renault Laguna, but I know it isn't. They're not supposed to slip. In actual fact, with a diesel, a slipping clutch can be quite tricky because, of course, you have more low-down torque. Another car I could possibly compare this to would be the Peugeot 408 that I test drove earlier on in the year, and I really liked it. I was surprised by how much I liked it. I knew I was going to like it, but I liked it more than I was expecting to like it. What about this though? I didn't even press the dials. I didn't mess with these dials or anything like that to find out how tactile they are, to find out whether they're nice to use, to find out whether they're the kind of thing you want to distract yourself from the job of driving in order to mess about with. As you'd expect, the diesel engine is actually, it's nice, it's smooth. Even though it's a 4-cylinder, Doesn't sound rough or anything. Still a diesel though. Actually, that's the problem really. That for me, the appeal of a diesel is that low down thump that you get, and the turbo just kicks in. But when you're having to drive it to avoid the clutch slipping, it's not as exciting. Mind you, this isn't supposed to be an exciting car in the first place. Do you know what? I actually really like this car though. For a car of this age to not have trim rattle, it's quite impressive. For a car of this age to not have knocks and clunks on the suspension, also impressive. Pity about the clutch, that's what's really bothering me. I can't really drive it in the way that I'd like to do. Not aggressively, but just to be able to put my foot down a bit so you can actually feel the turbo spool up and send me rocketing towards the horizon if it can. I like cars of this era though. I like the interior. I like the fact that you have visibility. I like the fact that they look a bit different on the road. They have a bit more road presence just because they're a bit rare. And for me, having lacquer peel and grey bits, everything like that, doesn't really detract too much away from what it actually is. A pleasant 90s executive car. This is another example of a car that I'd actually be quite happy to own. Not one with a slipping clutch, but definitely one of these. It looks unique. It looks old enough to be of interest. I like the fact that it's not precious, and it's big and spacious. It has all the stuff that you would need from the car inside, and I believe, even though this was before the proper Euro NCAP crash tasting. Oh, would you like a taste of my crash, madam? No, I wouldn't. I'd rather have a sandwich. Euro NCAP crash test safety regulations. This was before that, but I bet it's not that bad. I bet this is quite a pleasant car to have a crash in. It wouldn't be right to finish a video off without some sort of conclusion on the car I'm talking about, and that was this one. So what is my conclusion? You've probably gathered it already. I like the old thing. I like these. I'm not disappointed by it. I'd buy one. If there was one available for me to buy and I had the money to buy it, I probably would. I'd have to sell a Rover though, that's the only thing. Ah, scratch that. Has your life been ruined by Renault? Has your life been ruined by Renault? Has your life been ruined by Renault Laguna tailgate?